Hello, everyone, and good morning, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is yet again another member from the incredible Curious Corvid family. Now, my guest today is a Lithuanian poet and classical author whose work centers on themes of displacement, impermanence, and the subtleties of human interiority. His life across multiple cultural movements, cultural environments, including Italy, Germany, Monaco, Norway, England, Lithuania, Japan, and Hong Kong, has cultivated a distinctly transnational literary voice. Supplementing this experiential foundation, he holds a degree in literature and creative writing from the University of Winchester in England, where his formal studies refined his attention to narrative structure, symbolic resonance, and the phenomenological dimensions of language while studying to become a cross cultural diplomat. His creative orientation reflects a synthesis of Eastern and Western literary traditions. A central feature of his work is his use of natural phenomena, tides, rain, seasonal transitions, and shifting gradations of light as a metaphoric structure for exploring nostalgia, cultural estrangement, and the fragility of memory. His public works include contributions to a range of contemporary literary platforms. His poems appear in the 300 South media anthology Shattered Reflections. His North folk tale, The Hollow of Frostadr, is featured in There's a Hint in That There Holler, a charitable publications by the Laughing Man's House publication supporting post Hurricane Helen recovery in Western North Carolina. His poem, Armisha, is included in the Gypsophilia, I probably butchered that, I apologize, magazine, volume 3, issue 4, and Imber and Memorian Eater appear in ERA Literary Magazine. These works collectively demonstrate his ongoing engagement with mythic narrative, psychological inquiry, and poetic minimalism. He's also an assistant editor for the University of Winchester's anthology, Vortex. And his literacy development is enriched by a diverse network of writers, artists, and cultural figures who form part of his own broader intellectual circle. This includes authors such as Sarah Vorman, Stephanie Kellner, Jay Long, independent publishing figures like Raven White, CEO of Curious Corvid Publishing, which many of you will remember. She was one of the initial guests when I first started my YouTube journey all those years ago. And writers associated with that press, including Blue Sunshine, Star Sarius, Grace Reynolds, David Grinnell, and Tatiana Corbett. His circle further encompasses creative and literacy practitioners such as the Portuguese author Miguel Goncalves and Russian author Yana Stelvork, and Korean painter John Woon Gyon, as well as the author Anne-Marie Wells and Poon Ching Han, the Hong Kong pastor turned author, situates with situates him within a broader transnational dialogue regarding literature, spirituality, and cultural narrative. His participation in the 35th annual Hong Kong Book Fair further reflects his commitment to international literacy exchange. Taken together, these experiences, relationships, and influences have shaped him into a writer whose work bridges cultures, disciplines, and emotional registers. And he remains characterized by cultural history, quiet intensity, and a sustained exploration of the human meaning to whether or not remaining alive has any depth. So, without further ado, viewers and listeners, let us give a huge Wandering Scribe round of applause to our guest today, Mr. Ectorius Angel. Hector, welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you. I
I have to
apologize. It's
say,
such a long, long biography to read, apparently.
oh no, that was incredible. Absolutely loved reading it. And honestly, I cannot wait to talk with you about your background further as well as your works. So, as a little icebreaker, actor, is there a little known fact that a lot of people may not know about you?
Uh, I don't quite know. It will be perhaps that originally I'm a curly redhead. I
All right.
destroyed my hair many years ago because I thought as a child that constantly combing your hair would be great. But I did not know that when you do comb your hair eventually flattens once you're an adult. And so from now on, I have flat, straight hair.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. I used to have curly black hair, but when I got that cut and straightened, I now have straight black hair. It still gets
Yeah,
very thick, but it's just all straight. So I know the
it's
feeling.
just straight. Yeah.
Well, Hector, I am so honored to have you here on the show. And for many viewers who may not know about your works, as a little teaser, would you like to share with us some of your publications that you have worked on in the past and some that you are currently working on?
So let me find this for you real quickly. I have a publication that was recent, which was the last one you mentioned in Shadow Reflections from 300 South Media Group. I originally wrote other works for them under a different pen name before I decided to go public. And I believe recently the last one I did under this pen name and this author name, as I am known by, was the Gallery of Ghosts and Beneath the Midnight Sun, which was published by 300 South Media Group, which, funnily enough, I also know the publisher behind it, Jay Long.
Nice. Very, very nice. And you've also have in your inner circle some wandering scribe alumni such as Stephanie Kemmler, who was also featured on the show not too long ago.
She is an astoundingly talented author. I loved her blood work, her blood mad work regarding her book. I loved her first book as well. In general, I've always liked her work as is, and at the same time, she's in general just lovely as a person, kind,
Absolutely.
respectful.
Couldn't
I
agree more.
did want to read her work, A Year of Sin and Smoke, I believe it was called, or something of the like.
Ah,
One of her recent works, but I never got around to it. Was supposed to, but I didn't have the time. But eventually, I will get to it.
nice. Very nice. And of course, the person behind Curious Corvid, Raven White, who, as I said, viewers and listeners, was featured on the show during the Wandering Scribe's infancy when I first began my podcasting and YouTube journey. And she is an incredible author, an amazing human being. And I think she's probably the only person I've ever met in real life at a writers convention out of everyone that I have met in my inner circle thus far. She's an incredible author.
She is absolutely amazing author, absolutely amazing person in every aspect, really. I remember when I first approached her many years ago. Now it's been I don't know, I think 4 or 5 years by now. I first approached her via Instagram. We usually talked via Instagram a couple years ago because we were first starting out, and as people start out, you just stop talk during social media and the likes. And then eventually, I remember sending her two of my works rather, and from there on, our relationship just started from there. I became part of Curious Corvid in its community. I partook in some of the writing events. I've sent in some works to her that, as you know, currently are unpublished and eventually due to be when or if when specifically that happens in our lifetime and such. But yeah, I think probably she's the one who more than anything, she's the one who gave me a chance. If anyone else how within the publishing industry, you have to have an agent, and then when you have an agent, that agent has to fight for you. But usually, because the industry is so, how to put it, it's very tightened, it's very gate
Mhm.
kept. So if an agent cannot get your work through, usually that work will not come true to any publisher in the next 2 3 years, depending. because it highly depends on whether or not the editors are going to make a bid on it, and if they really want to make a bid on it. But with Raven, it wasn't so much as asking for an agent or an editor. It was more so I just sent in the works, and he said, "Yeah, great, go ahead." And ever since then, that's been it.
Absolutely. And that's something we're going to talk in more in depth when we get into the business side of being an author, this notion of networking and connections. But before we get to that, Hector, let's talk a little bit more about you and your work. So, based upon your bio, you've always been fascinated with the notion of cross cultural storytelling, pulling from
Yes.
different cultures, different experiences, and crafting narratives that focus on the human condition and many more. I'm very curious. What would you consider to be your definitive aha moment that really put you on this path to becoming an author and a poet?
Oh boy, that's a hard question to answer. I was very young when I started writing. I didn't start late. Many people do start late, and some people start young. I believe I started at the age of 8, 8 or 7, and I started writing these little short stories, these poems. As a young boy, you just try to write, and sometimes it's horrible, sometimes it's okay, but it's like childish writing. And
Mm,
I began from that, and little by little, I started making my way through different things. I met my protege, or at that time, I suppose, mentor, Jules. She is a Australian historical author, and I think I began my writing journey then, when I got to know and hear the words from her viewpoint. When I started writing, I was more or less, a nobody. You don't usually pick up someone and teach them how to write and edit and everything else by hand, because it's a lot of work. But for her, when she saw some of my original work, she sort of reached out to me and said, "Hey, I like what you're doing. I would like to teach you more." And
nice.
from there on, I sort of just started on my journey on that, and from there on out, I suppose.
That's amazing. That is really, really amazing. And what would you say when you first got started in this industry? What was probably the first thing that really took you by surprise about being a published author and a poet?
I worked with editing for a while for two different public companies that I cannot name given my contract, but one of those publishers I worked as an editor for regarding this much, more or less. And usually you wouldn't expect someone to be an editor for smut. It's not a very common thing, but I did. And then I worked as an editor for prose and poetry. Both instances, I saw how extremely tight and gatekept the industry really is. It's a
Mm,
horrific type of tightness that we keep around it. It's like a leash. Now, sure, you can say with the rise of AI and all that, you can kind of automate editing and you can kind of automate a lot of things. But the acceptance rates for authors are, even for me, when I was an editor, the general consensus of how many authors I would edit per year were no less than about 4 to 7 authors per every year only, no more than about 7 tops. So the acceptance rate still is rather, it's extremely low, very low, and it's not even based on editors bidding it. It's more so based on just the industry being the way it is. We don't have the funds. Most publishers do not really have the funds, even the biggest ones. Penguin does not really have the funds. Most of the funds come from selling books that are from well-known people, such as celebrities, and then those funds from those celebrities usually go back into the pockets of the other authors to be published, because those are the only. Well, the one thing most people don't know is that majority of the books in publishing that are sold are not the common books you would think about. It's not the classics. It's not the teaching material. it's mainly specifically the autobiographies of celebrities. Now, a
Yes.
large portion of that is sold, and when it is sold, now sure, you have the people who gain money from it, which is the celebrity, but most of that money goes back into the industry to actually pay for the authors that are signed, such as new authors, older authors, concurring and ongoing authors, and anyone else who gets signed like six figures. Usually, that money is where that goes. It's usually gone to keeping those authors afloat, and I think that is an issue because we do not read as a population. We don't really buy books anymore as a population. Even if you go into local books or anywhere in the world, you'll see out of hundreds, every single people that pass around the streets, you probably see only 5, 20 people who go into a bookstore and less than that who actually buy the book itself. It's
Mhm.
it's a travesty, if anything, really. The industry is it is suffering. It is highly suffering, but no one really wants to talk about it, not even on the publishing and industry side, not on the editor side. We are we are struggling.
That is a very good point, Hector. And we're probably going to be going more in detail, specifically on that point when we get to the business side. But again, going back to you and your journey. So, when you began writing your own stories, I'm very curious. What are sort of like the inspirations that help you cultivate these ideas for stories or poems that you have? And secondly, after you've decided upon an idea for a poem or a story, do you outline it specifically or do you kind of see how it goes in a sense of writing by the seam of your pants?
I am not a planner. Under no circumstances am I a planner. I do not like planning. I find it egregious. Um, Now, sure, I have to plan some things in my life, but when and if I can, I will avoid it. When it comes to writing, though, I do not outline any of my work, not really, unless it's a very, very specific type of work which takes years of research and such, which one of them I did send to you recently.
Hmm.
Um, no, I don't really outline. I write as it is. I choose based on how do I feel in the moment. If I feel
Right.
devastation, if I feel pain, if I feel joy, anything that really happens to me in the moment there and then, I will write. Even if I'm outside, I'll write on my phone or I'll write on a notebook or I'll write on a Google Docs. Like anything in general that I will be able to write on. And if I find a most specific, how do you put it, um, emotional weight. Once I have that, I will just go for it.
Right. Very true. Very, very true. And now looking back on your career thus far, when you first began writing and experimenting and finding your voice, what were your goals that you had as the author and the poet master, so to speak, as well as the promise making to not just yourself, but also your prospective readers?
I That's a hard question to answer. Um, what was the idea behind it originally? Um, I am not quite sure. Originally, I began with the idea that I wanted to cross the gaps in cultures. I wanted to let, because when you go out of your comfort zone and you take something in from your comfort zone and then from outside of your comfort zone, you learn something new, but it's still highly uncomfortable. You don't like to try new things, not most people anyway. So most people being the way they are, that they feel safe in their comfort, they feel joyful in their comfort, and there's a sense of home in being comfortable. But when
Mm,
you are willing to go out of that comfort zone and say, hey, I would like to learn about this, to me, that was more impactful than anything else because I did not grow up not taking risks. I grew up having to take risks constantly. So taking these risks constantly to me meant if I'm going to be doing it and no one else is going to be doing it, I want to show people that there's more to life than just being in one place, doing one thing, and knowing one thing only. You have other countries, for example, with the United States political problems that are going on over there, people very much are more or less always stuck to staying in the United States and staying in their own respective homes and doing the same work they do and everything else. And most people can't even afford going outside of their own country, that too. But they don't have access to seeing the outside world as well. To them, now you sure you can go to YouTube, you can go to Instagram and social media, but you can't interact um, interlinkedly with other cultures. You can't go to another culture and say, I
Mm.
want to learn about, let's say, Japanese sake brewing. I want to learn about swordsmanship. I want to learn about Vietnamese poetry or anything else in that regard, the international aspect of things. But in reality, you can't. Most people cannot. It's either you can't afford it, you don't have the general perspective to do it, or you don't have the willpower to do it. And I want to show people that, hey, there is more to life. If you're just willing to step out, just one small step, you will see there's a whole other world out there. You can learn about everything and anything you want: poetry, languages, literature in general, history, technology. There are such amazing things in this world, and yet people just seem not to want to learn about it. To me, that is important. To me, showing the people that, hey, different cultures do have values, and so do different countries in their history and people. Maybe you should actually interact with them. Maybe you should show them, hey, show me your world, show me your culture. I want to learn. To me, that's always been something that is important, even to my prospective readers, to myself, to everyone, really.
Very true. Very true. And kind of following through to that, in your writing, Hector, how do you balance the authenticity of either a poem's themes or the subtlety in your writing, but also the complexities that are tied with it?
I don't think I do balance it. As far as I've heard from my editors and the readers and many more, and even my partner who reads almost all my work every time, I seem to weigh more on emotion than anything else, and
Mm,
the heft of it, as heavy as I possibly can. It is perhaps one of the more stronger points for me is emotion has to come true, and no matter how brutal you have to make it, I have to make people feel that they're in that emotion there and then, with or without um, balance, so to speak. And to
absolutely.
me, I don't believe I balance it. I do have nuances, and you can see it in like if you read specific poems and such. Um, I recently gave a months or 2, 3 months ago, I gave Sunshine Blue some of my poetry, and we exchanged some of our poems and such to see what we think and such. And yeah, you can sort of see we really base our works off of strong keynotes, strong points regarding emotion and the heft of it, brutality as well. Sometimes for me, especially for her, brutality is on a whole other level, but it is great brutality. It is the kind that is very impactful and direct. For myself, I try to keep it nuanced, but at the same time, my poems tend to be very long-winded, so there's
Absolutely.
no real balance.
All right, that's fair. That is fair. And now for our first fan question, Hector. One of my viewers wishes to know in your writing, whether your stories or poems, which has been the probably the easiest one to write and the most difficult one to write.
I found prose to be the hardest. I don't like prose. I don't like long stories. one of the works I sent to you recently was a Greek retelling of sorts, which is the Remember We Once Lived. I sent that to you
Mhm.
recently, and that took me, I'll be honest with you, it took more than 5 years of my life to just to research alone, not even write. It was having to go through archives, having to look at all the primary and secondary sources, and then having to read other fiction novels and then non-fiction novels, and then having to do all this research for one novel alone to me seemed so extensive and exhaustive and just absolutely soul crushing, because you have to put money forward to go somewhere and then have to find the sources you want to learn about the sources and read them. Whereas with poetry, you don't necessarily have to do all this work. You just write. You write as you feel it there and then in a moment. And that is by far the easiest thing to do is poetry. Poetry is the heft of emotion, the line of sadness and depression, of joy, of sexuality and lust and hunger and any possible like physical sense, emotion, or anything else you might have. I feel emotion and everything else regarding the human condition can be encompassed in poetry rather easily. With prose, you have to showcase a lot more. You can't just be short-sighted and short-handed. You have to really, really go out of your depth and say, here's a story. Now here's 5 layers of this so that you can understand the story, which I hate. I don't like doing long stories, but you have to. In this industry, you have to.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. I've actually tried my hand at short stories, which I was not comfortable doing, but I realized that there is kind of an art to writing short stories and the craft that goes into them in creating, very complete and complex stories in short amount of words. I've tried my hand at poetry also, but poetry is definitely my kryptonite. I am not a poet. I can imitate poetry, but I am not a poet, nor I would consider myself to be a poet. It is, in my opinion, very, very difficult writing. But the reaction that I've got from friends and family from the poems that I have written has been comforting, say the least. And that kind of brings into my next question, Hector. When you began this journey of yours, what was the reaction like from friends and family? And
Oh boy.
from your reviewers, have the reviews been positive, critical, or a 50-50 split?
It's been so when I first started out, I chose a completely random pen name. Didn't really matter that much. I started out just randomly writing things on the net. I thought, posted out there, no impact, no nothing. And sure, that was my first initial thought until I saw that that one account started getting. First, it was 50 followers, then 100 followers, then suddenly 500, and 1,000, then 2,000, 3,000, and eventually, to me, it felt like, oh, maybe writing on the net is not as simple as one might think it is. It is perhaps far more dangerous. You don't know the impact you can have. It has a lot of impact. And when I started doing it, I thought, being a random account, I closed it down eventually because I wasn't having it. And I thought, if I'm going to write, I want to write something on my own name, under my own identity. And I closed that down. But I did understand and learn that starting out like that, there's a lot of caveats you don't often usually learn off the bat. When you start posting things on the net, even if
Mm,
it's Instagram, even if it's Facebook, even if it's any writing site really, any general writing site as is, and you think, well, nothing's going to happen to it. 8 out of 9 times, you're probably wrong. People will catch on to it. They will start reading it. They will start sharing it because people like seeing things that they relate to. I had to learn that the hard way because then I had to learn how do you manage yourself as a public person? How do you
yes.
manage yourself as a person of importance? And a public representative of the people, and many more things. And then you have to think about, how is your image weighed? How do you publicly weigh yourself to other people, even on interviews, even on writing, in any capacity, really? You have to constantly be thinking, am I doing the right thing? And is this going to affect me later on? And to me, that was
Right.
probably one of the most specific things I learned when I started doing the writing like that myself. And all the caveats that come into it, I really did not know how much it would affect things. Like, for example, I would not be in this interview right now had it not been for learning those things when I was much younger.
Absolutely. Very true. And kind of a very leading into now the personal reflective questions, Hector. Like all creatives, we come across, the dreaded writer's block and imposter syndrome, and kind of second guessing and self doubting our abilities to create and to make something meaningful. For you, have you ever had those moments? And if so, how did you overcome it?
I did. I had many such moments. One of those moments, I was writing. So, to give you some context and perspective, a few years ago, I was writing a work that was a prototype at the time, hadn't been set to Raven yet. Um, I was writing it in the sense of something that bothered me and affected me, and I wanted to say a message to the person I love and who I am absolutely with right now. Lovely, lovely person. I love her with all my heart. Um, and at the time, I was writing page by page, line by line, and I thought to myself, well, it's not going to go anywhere, and I'm not, I'm not able to continue it. So I had to, I had to force myself constantly, day in, day out. I would wake up, I'd look over the reading, I'd edit the reading, no, the underlines on the document, and I'd be like, well, I don't like this. Edit it, cancel it, edit it, cancel it, cancel. And I did this countless times. Don't know how many times by now. Countless, countless times. And each time I would delete sometimes 4 lines, sometimes entire paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs, until eventually I gave it to my partner at the time. She read over it, she outlined some different things, and I got that feedback and started rewriting the thing from the top up again. And then eventually, a couple of years later, now down the line, this is the one of the 2 works I've sent to Raven for publishing, which will come eventually when it is due. And from that writer's block came, I wouldn't say a substantial novel. There's a lot of editing to go still. There's, as you know, in the publishing industry, there's a lot of editing to go through, no matter where you are. Um, no matter which novel you write, there's always going to be a lot of editing to do, even if it's perfect. You still have to do a lot of specific editing.
Yes.
There's a lot of character-based editing, a lot of developmental editing to be at, but from that sort of writer's block, as one would put it, I've had horrific months where you just keep forcing yourself again and again and again. And most of the time, I didn't even think it was good. I thought, for all I care, I would just toss it away, burn it, let it be. Does it matter now? I'd probably not care about it that much and just toss it away and then be done with it. But there were people who convinced me that, it's perhaps worth continuing. It's perhaps worth having. You just need to force it. And from that sort of grows the idea that, yeah, writer's block is there. It's gonna be there. It still is to me. I have some things I'm writing right now that I can't. Under no circumstances can I continue. But I have to. Whether I like it or not, I have to. And I think
Absolutely.
that
Very true.
the most important part of a writer's block is, if you can't be a writer, you can't write. But if you want to be a writer, you have to write. Force yourself. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter how hard you feel. Doesn't matter if you're hopeless on the street. Doesn't matter if you're just hungry and no energy. If you have something to say, write it anyway. I think that was the most impactful thing for me, was you have to keep going. Whether or not you like it, you have to keep going.
Yes, very true. Very, very true. And now we get into the reflective portion of the interview. And the first question focuses on what does it mean to be an author, pardon me, in the digital age? Because being an author now is not the same as it was 20 years ago. Traditional
Oh
publishing 20
yeah.
years ago was a dominant form, still is the dominant form, and indie publishing or small press publishing was seen as a lesser form of publication, depending on who you were talking to. But over the last 2 decades, small press publishing and indie publishing has skyrocketed and in some ways been on the same level as trad publications. And as we look in the digital age, authors are now realizing that if they want to stay ahead of the curve, social media has become an integral tool in the author's arsenal. From social media platforms, website, an online store, it is essential to have all of these things. But like social media and everything, it can be emotionally draining. We leave ourselves exposed to a lot of people. Our vulnerability is sometimes thrown into our face, and it can just be too much. It can absolutely be too much.
Oh yeah.
And what I found very fascinating about what it is to be an author in the digital age is that not all of us are prepared to be this aspect of ourselves. We're not marketers, we're not business people, we are writers. But we've had to become a jack of all trades. And with that said, Hector, with the weight of being an author in the digital age on one's shoulders, what still has disciplined you to stay true to your core values as an author and as an individual and telling the stories and poems you want to tell?
I I'll be honest with you. I stopped caring about social media in every aspect. I believe that if you write something, whatever you write should leave the impact by itself. It shouldn't be
Mm.
social media because in the end, I'll give you for an example. Have you watched the Netflix series Arcane?
I've heard of it, but I've never watched it.
So the man behind the music, now most people will not really know his name, but he made the music behind Arcane, and if you listen to that and hell, you even remotely look it up on the internet, most of the people already know what you're talking about. Most of the people will know what it is because they've seen it, they've heard it, they felt it, they've had the exposure to it. And I think that the same should be for authors is sure, you can say media and marketing is the best thing, and in some cases it is. That there are some publishers who will actually only sign you if you have bare minimum 100,000 followers on the social media with active engagement, or minimum 1 million followers with active engagement. And now that is a horrific truth to know, that is a very horrific truth to know, that, but it is very much a part of it. But the rest of the industry doesn't so much care about your public image so much as your work. What can
Mm,
you present and what can you leave that people will come to eventually and read and explore and discover? For example, I'll give you a great example. There's one author that I read recently, the last year was Miller. She is the one who wrote a song, the Song of Achilles. A couple years ago, she published her book, The Song of Achilles. Didn't take a lot of track. Got published, plenty of copies sold, but didn't take track, right? Now, you go forward a few years and an audiobook version of it comes out, and suddenly there's millions of versions of it being sold all across, solely because a young girl liked the audio version and shared it on Instagram, and suddenly people got the exposure to it and just hearing the reading, and they just went and bought the book. Millions and millions of readers buying these books because of the exposure to the work. Was it any social media stunts or anything else? No. It was literally just someone liked the work, said, "Hey, I like this. You should hear it." And from there on out, that work just got sold, and God knows how many sales that might have been throughout the last 3 years or 4 years even. But it's a lot. It's very much a lot. And I think that it's still the same for me as well. I think that any author worth their own selves, worth of anything that they have as a worth regarding their work, regarding their talent, regarding who they are. You should not be a product so much as you should be a thing. No, not a thing, a person with a message. And if you can be the person with the message and simply leave your message without becoming a product for sale, I think that is better overall than rather not. It conserves your dignity, it conserves your self-respect, it conserves your private identity and private life, because frankly, in the digital age, having a private life with or without partners, with or without family and anything else, highly important, should not be
Mhm.
even a discussion. Highly, highly important to privatize and keep everything else private in general. Your life should be private by standard, and you should have the right for privacy. But most, if you do marketing and such, you don't often have the right to privacy. You have to show where you live, because sometimes when you do filming a book, you have to film your book somewhere in a corner of your house, and someone can eventually figure out where you live, or something else, or how you live, what kind of social class you come from, or other types of
Right.
things. And I think that doing that to me is an absolute no. I, even for myself, the only thing I have posted on Instagram has been some of the works that I've been accepted for, and me traveling the world here and there, and some of the exhibitions and book exhibitions that I'm part of, and festivals and the likes. But I don't personally share much of anything regarding marketing. I let it speak for itself. And if you go to Google and you look up my name, then hey, great, there you go. Someone has looked me up, and from there on they found their own journey. And I think that that to me is more important. I've seen people just sort of ask me like, "Have you? Who are you?" And I tell them my name. 2 days later, they tell me, "Hey, I looked you up and then found my accounts or something else," and they go from there. It's like, "Oh, great, I found your works. Yeah, that I'm happy by all means." I think that that's more important, having a name and then having that name tied to more works than rather thousands and thousands and thousands of links regarding social media. It's far more important, far more. It weighs more in the industry than most people really know. Um, because if you present yourself via media marketing, most of the marketing will be regarding your product. And most people, when they see a product once, five, six times, maybe five, six people will buy it. But the rest will sort of be like, "Ah, I've seen this before. I've seen this before. Keep going, keep scrolling, keep moving." And that is detrimental, and it is perhaps one of the lesser things to do. You shouldn't keep focusing on your product. You shouldn't keep focusing on selling your product, because selling the product will not happen when people get used to your product. You should more so leave a curiosity of, who is this? And then to answer that, there's only one thing you can do: buy their work and read it to understand them. I
Mhm.
think to me, that is more important than marketing. And to this day is probably the most important thing on in the social media age, is keep some mystery regarding who you are as a person. If you don't, and you keep shoving the product in people's faces, people will get eventually fed up.
Right. Very true. I like that answer. That's probably the most detailed and eloquent answer I've ever gotten for that question, Hector. So thank you for that. And that
No
perfectly
problem.
segues that perfectly segues into the business side of the interview, the business side of being an author. Now, the icebreaker question for this, Hector, looking back on your career thus far in terms of marketing and promoting your works, is there anything you would have done differently?
I would not have, no. I've learned that having done both parts, marketing and non-marketing, and selling and non-selling. Oh, excuse me. It's that time of year. Um, I would not have done anything differently, not really. I think I would have kept it as low as I possibly could. I would have done my work and written my work and published my work and sort of just kept it there. I would have continued on. I think that if you keep publishing it, or no, if you keep publicizing it everywhere, it just doesn't really go anywhere eventually. Because I've seen that when I publicized a lot of things, the statistics I saw from people buying the product
Mm,
versus followers activity and engagement and clicks and everything else, there's a moment in which 100 plus people, 120 to about 500 total, they clicked on the page, bought the product, and then after that there's a sharp decline because people keep seeing the same product again and again and again, and just sort of just declines steadily or slowly, but you can see a decline that sort of comes along. Whereas when I didn't do that, I felt like I had more respect for myself as a person. I felt like when meeting people, then they look you up or just try to find you. There's a more of a, this person has more privacy. This person isn't someone we so readily immediately know. There's more respect regarding it, and there's more willingness to buy your works and read them just to get to know you as a person alone than rather buying the product because you sold it to someone. And I think that is something I would still do. I wouldn't change it. No, I'd probably still keep it to the same way, business wise. Now, income wise, you might say, well, income wise, it's not a great thing. And it's not. I'll be honest. I don't get most of my income by books. I'm a linguist by trade. I
mm,
do more diplomacy than anything else. I work with diplomacy in general. I work with language and translation, interpretation, and more important matters at hand than rather this. And income wise, I don't earn a lot as an author. I don't. Most people don't. This is a universal truth. Authorship is not something you gain a lot because even if you get published by a big publisher, you either get 10% per sale, which is probably $1 or less than $1, or you get
right.
40 to 50%, depending on if that publisher is not a big one, but a medium scale publisher who can afford to give you 40 to 60% of sale because they don't have the larger capacity to host many more authors yet. But authorship, you don't get a lot. You get a lot in terms of royalties if you work on large scale projects. Now that is by all means something I would highly, highly recommend anyone to do. Movie scripts, theater, anything that you can have continued royalties from is more than in anything else a lifeline for every author out there. Anything that can have continued royalties must and should always be done. It will save your life as an author. It will keep you afloat while you work on the other creative parts of yourself and the things you want to work on. And by all means, it is not an easy world to live in. We don't earn a lot. Not
No.
publishers, not authors, not editors. No one really earns a lot in this industry.
No, you hit the nail right on the head, Hector. We do not. This is not an industry to get rich quick. You really have to understand, as you perfectly said, and even going forward, adding my own thoughts to this, um, you really have to know that if you do want to make a career out of this, and I'm sure you probably back me up or provide insight of this, is that generally, according to the market research, for someone who wants to be a full-time author, you will have to publish at least around 8 to 12 books at least to have some
Yeah,
form of income and standing in the industry. And definitely from there is what I've seen, doing the show now for about 6 7 years. I've learned that a majority of us authors, some of us began our careers, in the last 5 years, myself included, during the height of the quarantine. That gave us a time to really find our voice, but it also flooded the market. And I definitely think the market is very oversaturated
Oh, it
in
is,
terms
yes.
of, new works and stuff like that. And of course, as what you brought up earlier in the interview, AI has definitely changed the game uh, for worse, in the sense of it has made creativity mass produced, but creates a false sense of it, because there are many books that I have seen that are created with AI, and it kind of does a disservice to it. Now, I have said this on numerous other episodes, viewers and listeners. AI is a part of every feature that we use in our daily lives. There's no way to escape it. Now, AI itself is not inherently bad. It can definitely be used as a tool. And for authors, it can be used as a tool in the sense of organizing our notes, our thoughts, our outlines, refining it. Absolutely. I am all in favor of, the behind the scenes, the meat and potatoes, the skeleton of the book writing process in that regard. When it comes to the whole process of writing the book, that is the author in and of
Yeah,
itself.
I think that
And
I think that in AI, the only thing I've used it a few times. Once because I worked with code for a while, and if you write code, you can't always do it alone. You need some sort of help.
mhm,
It,
yeah,
it it's not easy. You do need some help so every now and then.
mhm,
But for the most part, I mainly use AI throughout my lifetime, mainly for sourcing and bibliographies, footnotes, the likes, because it's easier to when you have all your sources in one document, but you need to organize it, and it's just far easier to tell an AI, hey, organize this list for me and make it into a bibliography that is, A, B, C, D, D, and so on and so forth. And that's perhaps the easier thing to do for me with AI. It is easier to have things within documents and such just compiled and summarized and just made easier for you to access and use, because
right.
when you're working with a lot of sources and you need a lot of quotes and a lot of other people, and now you'll have a document maybe like 40-30 pages, which is like purely just sources, quotes, and things people have said and statistics and all sorts of stuff, but you can't so easily put it all into one document without some order. So to me,
Mhm,
yeah, I'd say AI wise, that's probably the best thing I've ever gotten out of it, is just that the compilation and the code, and just in general the safety of having order in documents. But that's it. When you add works into AI, to me it seems, as far as I've read many prompts throughout AI, I've had friends who use AI, I have flatmates who've used AI, I've had other people use AI throughout my life. And each time you prompt anything, now, sure, it comes back great. Sometimes you read a great story from it. And by all means, because it's been trained on great stories. So
mhm,
it is supposed to give you great stories. But you can still see that there's this outline there that is always there, no matter what you prompt. That outline is always going to be there. And because it's always there, you're always going to feel like this is still a robot. This is still not
right.
human. No matter what you do, it's still very much non human. Why? Because that outline will be prioritizing what sells and how to sell it and how to convince people to keep reading and reading in the most psychologically proficient way they can possibly make it, versus as a human being, you're just going to write, this is how I feel, I want you to know about it. And when you write that, it's like, damn, I feel that. Whereas with AI, you just kind of look at it, it's just there. There's no human emotion in it. There's no heaviness, there's no genuine sense of self when you read these type of things.
Mhm,
And I think that is that. No, sure, AI is great in the terms that, for example, cultures like Ghana and Gaza and generally Africa, war-torn cultures or cultures with not a lot of money, their only way to access education, reading and writing and much more is through AI, because usually you only have one or two laptops in a classroom if you can afford it in countries that cannot afford these things, or you'll have a war zone or something else, but no access to, you know, sourcing things. And so the only way for you to write and read is through AI. If you're in a war zone or a famine zone or technologically, how to put it, technologically not adaptive zones. So anything in Africa that cannot afford it, or anything in the Middle East that cannot afford specific technologies and access to books and more, it's great for these people. It's great for the people that really, really need it. But at the same time, it will be detrimental long term, because we do have robotics. And I come from a background where I originally worked with weapons technology. My original background, other than languages, is technology as a whole. Our family comes from talking to people who are important and doing jewelry and design and much more. But me,
Mm,
myself, I come from technology. Now I know the strong suits of technology. I know the importance of using technology, how to use it, and everything else. And it's great in many aspects. It is great. It's amazing in the things we are capable of as humans. We can create robot dogs. We can create walking robotic assistants, and we can create brains that can think on their own. And that's amazing. But long term, this will become a problem. We will have a rise in it sooner than later. We will have a rise in natural resources that are not going to be possible to have later on, because chipsets are going to become more expensive. Gold is going to become more expensive and more rare to get, because we keep mining all the resources in our homes. And I think that the more technologically these things rise and become part of our cultures, the more of a lenient to
mm,
almost non-lenient threatening danger it will become. It is something that evolves by itself now. It has learned to evolve by itself. So that means even as authors, painters, people who do music, people who edit movies, special effects, anything of that likeness, eventually robotics will find a way to automate it almost near perfect. And when it does, that's when things will become worse.
very true. Very, very true. And now we kind of go into what I like to call some rapid fire fan questions. So, pardon me. Here is the first fan question.
Oh,
Okay, that was a little bizarre.
yeah,
That
networks.
no problem, no problem. I'll make sure to cut that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you were asking,
Oh yes. Before that, we're now going to go into some rapid fire fan questions. So, beginning with, in your opinion, which do you prefer in storytelling, themes or tropes?
oh, themes. I
All
I
right.
am not a fan of tropes.
All right. All right. Next one. In your opinion, which of the five senses is the most difficult to emulate in storytelling?
Ooh, do you mean physical senses, or do you mean more emotional senses?
You know what? Let's actually talk about both. So, the five physical senses and then the emotional senses.
Physical sense, I would say, would be, ooh, lust is rather easy to explain. Hunger is easy to explain because you understand how hunger feels like. Um, General touch, rather easy to explain. I think out of all the physical senses they can physically feel inside yourself or externally, it would probably be Loneliness. Now, when you feel lonely physically, there's a sort of heaviness that you feel, almost like depression, but not the same as depression, but you feel that sort of heaviness in your stomach, and you feel that sort of heft in your heart and your body, and you feel sluggish and tired, and nothing really feels connected and okay. And that sense, to me, physically, heaviness itself, that heaviness of feeling lonely when you physically feel it, which I don't know if you would categorize that as a physical feeling, but to me, that is a physical feeling. To me, that is a physical sense. The sense of feeling alone, extremely hard to make people understand, because now most people can say, oh, I understand loneliness, I understand how it feels to be alone, but how do you understand it physically when you have no one and nothing left? That part when your body almost gives up on you and says, we've had enough, it's time to either rest or stop, but we've had enough.
Mm.
That's a really hard thing to explain. It's a really, really hard thing to describe emotionally as well. Emotionally, I think distance. Distance
Okay.
is I work with distance. Most of my work regarding anything is always distance, keeping a distance from and toward things, being a distant observer. But distance takes a lot of it takes a lot of nuisance. It takes a lot of work. It requires a lot of attention and keeping attention on things. So when you're observing a cup of coffee, for example, and you're just probably looking at the coffee and you're saying, "Ah, I'm looking forward to the coffee." But sometimes you're kind of looking from a distance, and all you see isn't even the coffee cup. It's just there's steam rising from the coffee cup. There's a gentle sense of warmth, and you feel like you want this, not because you want it and you're hungry for it, but because to some extent, this cup of coffee is going to make you feel a little less lonely today. It's going to make you feel a little less horrible. And that warmth, that gentle gift of the coffee or tea, whichever one may prefer, seems like a gift in a sense. And I think using that example, it is highly important to observe details and be as soft and gentle as you can be with details, because distance is extremely hard to explain. It's not everyone wants to be distant. Most people feel a want for connection, they want to feel for closeness. So most people will avoid distance, but the people who do want to feel distance but not distant from things, but also understand that they're not alone in being the distant person and just being an observer of things.
Mm.
It's a very hard thing to explain and describe and make people who are not used to that kind of emotion feeling really understand. Really, really hard. I've learned that over the last few years. It's probably the hardest thing ever to really make people understand is that.
Mm. All right. Okay. Another fan question. In your opinion, which is probably the most fun to write? A scene that invokes an emotional response or a scene that's based in conflict?
Ooh, I feel like both of those are the same almost. Because if you want to evoke an response, that too can be conflict. Now, response in what context? Are we talking response in terms of physical revolt? Are we talking in terms of emotional capacity? What kind of response would this be?
I guess that's probably the fun of it when it comes to writing scenes like those is like, are you trying to invoke an emotional one or a physical one? I think for this one, let's say a non-physical and emotional response.
Emotional response. I think, yes, I would prefer the first one over the conflict. Conflict is you have to. I've learned this the hard way is when you're writing conflict, to which surprised me by all means is you have to be angry. You have to really, really be angry. And that feeling when you're sitting with it, once you're done, you're still going to be sitting with that anger and that feeling with nowhere to go with it. And I hate that emotion when You write out the scene, it's conflicting, and everything's going, and it hits hard, but the moment you're done with it, you're sitting there angry for no reason. You got angry to write about anger, and then you have to sit with anger that is useless because you're not actually angry at anything, but you're sitting with a sort of falsely made anger to evoke anger. Whereas the other one is far easier because you're not really, you don't have to be angry about it. You just kind of have to write something that says, I was just shattered by this. Now I want you to feel the same way. And once you write that, it sort of goes as, okay, you're reading something, everything's light, and suddenly starts getting heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier until eventually you can kind of understand where it's going to go. And then the moment you understand it, you kind of go, oh God, oh there. And once you understand that, that's, it's a lot easier. Whereas conflict, oh God, no, I don't like conflicts. I am not a fan of conflicts. Have never been a fan of conflicts. I don't believe I will ever be. It is, it leaves me angry every time. I don't like sitting with anger, especially when I have no way to solve it. That to me is like 2 hours of sitting with anger that you have no idea how to solve nor do anything about. And you're just sort of sitting there for 2 hours angry at legitimately nothing. You can be angry at the most absurd thing. It makes no sense, but you have to do it to write about it. And oh, no, no, I cannot do anger. That conflict and anger is no, absolutely uncomfortable.
All right. And here's another fan question, probably one of my favorites. Again, in your opinion, Hector, which is between the two the most daunting for an author to face? Knowing when the story is finished or knowing when to stop writing?
Ooh, ooh. Now you got me on the spot on that one. I recently struggled with that one. I really struggled with that one. I recently had I'm doing my university degree right now. I recently had an assignment of prose, and I really horribly wanted to continue it. I absolutely wanted to continue it, but because university limits you to like 1,000 words, 3,000 words, and that's it. You can't write anymore. And to me, that was like, oh no, you can't do this to me. I have to continue this. I want to continue this. I need to. But you have to have self-control. And then the thing I sent to Raven, and you, I knew it would end, and I knew that eventually it would have to end because there's a limit to historically the thing I wrote about does end eventually. So you have to, when you get to that point, you can't really continue writing it because
Mm,
it's done, it's ended. The story of the person is done. And once I knew that, and I ended the story, and to me was like, I want to continue it. I want to make a story of what happens in the afterlife. Where do they go? What happens next? And these type of things. But to me, you kind of can't. It's done. It's over. You have to accept that it's over. Story's
right.
over. There's nothing more. And I think the hardest part for me was not even accepting that, not even accepting the whole thing with knowing when to stop writing or that it's going to end. It's when a story ends, you bond with the characters you build, and you don't even know it until the end. Because as you go, now you'll be talking in your own mind in the voices of the characters, and you'll think to yourself every single day in the same voices. You'll look at the worldview even as your own characters, and you don't realize it until it's too late. And by the time it's too late, you don't want to let go. You do not want to let it end. You just say like, I don't want you to die. I don't want this story to end. I can't. Please don't go. But that to me, once I came to that conclusion, was like, it's time. It's time. I have to say goodbye. It's time. Now your story ends and we have to
Hmm.
part ways. God, that hurts. It hurts so bad.
Very well spoken again, Hector. Very well spoken. And before we reach the end of this incredible author interview, of course, I want to talk about something we mentioned in the beginning, and that is, of course, being a part of a author community, a writing community, and of course, for you guys, that is the one of them is the Curious Corvid community. Now, you did mention earlier about how you got a chance to meet Raven, talk, and showcase your writing to her and being part of that community. Looking back on it, what has it been like being a part of a community, finding your tribe of authors who may write different styles of storytelling, but collectively they all have the same goal in mind, and that is, of course, telling immersive, engaging in stories that provoke as well as bring about discussions.
Ooh, that you know, when I first started with Curious Corvid, a couple years ago, it's now 2020. Yeah, it's about to be 2026. I forgot it's Christmas. Merry
I
Christmas.
know.
Well, it is Christmas indeed. 5 years ago, give or take. That would be 2021, 2020, give or take. Yeah, somewhere around that. I At the time I was sort of going about doing whatever I do, and I didn't have any specific goals in mind. I thought, things will be as the way they are. Um, and I didn't think to find anyone, not really. I didn't think I'd find anyone really to stick to, because in the end, I'm an author. Authors come and go. We just fade away here and there, and then we appear somewhere else.
Mhm.
Um, but when she invited me and said, "Hey, I'd like you to be part of this," like, I was suspicious at first, because being online as a person, being a not a very present person online, you're not often um there mentally. But when she did invite me and said, you should join this community, and I did, and I'll be honest with you, it was lovely. We started doing things together. We started having these little events together, and I got to know Sunshine Blue. I got to know Stephanie Kemler. I got to know many other authors in general throughout all of Curious Corvid, and also from two other publishers, because of the interconnection, where you can sort of see some authors who are published by another publisher, but still, interact with some Curious Corvid and so on. And having that sort of sense of home, and I can't describe home, because home is different to everyone. But home to me, having a sort of sense of belonging, as in, for a moment, you feel like you belong. And Raven, no matter what it was, you could be a transgender person who just recently changed your sex. You could be gay. You could be straight. You could be American or foreign. Doesn't matter what background you have. Doesn't even matter who you are. Raven just welcomes anyone, and that to
Mhm.
me made all the difference, because it didn't matter who we were, didn't matter what kind of extremities we came from, or our personal life situations. It was, in the end, you are welcome here. This is home. And that, more than anything, mattered the most. It was the acceptance, it was the lack of struggle. You didn't have to struggle to get published, or to have your work put in front of a publisher and say, hey, would you would you just do me this one honor of reading just this alone? And in most publishers, you won't even get a foot in. You can't. It's near impossible. But with Curious Corvid, I asked Raven, and she more than obliged. Now, sure, it might have taken some time, and as all things do, but there was no struggle. There was no fight. There was
Mhm.
no horrific events. She just sort of said, "Yeah, let me get back to you." And then she did, and she gave me her own thoughts, and then an editor's feedback and thoughts as well. And I think that might have made all the difference. The fact that one publisher is willing to say, and sort of just go, Doesn't matter if you, oof, sorry, being sick and all that. Doesn't matter if you have a publishing background or editing background or don't. If you have a story that you want to tell, and we feel inclined that this is a story we want to tell, let us read it. And that, I think, for all of us made all the difference. For Sunshine, for myself, for Stephanie, for uh let me remember what names it was.
Vorman, who I think is also a
No,
Wandering Scribe alumni.
no, Woman, I think got published by someone else. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
she
she
was
did.
the other. She was another, not Curious Corvid, but it was another.
Yeah,
She
Raven
would have been
something.
signed with Curious Corvid.
Oh, Quill and Crow, that
Yeah,
was.
Quill and Crow. That was it.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was Grace Reynolds, Ray Wicks, Grace
Mm.
Reynolds, Tatiana Corbett. It was lovely, by the way. And I think it was another academic that I remember hearing about. His name was, if I can remember it, David Grinnell. Yes, David Grinnell.
Mm.
I remember Raven told me, "Can I send this to David Grinnell? Because he's an academic who does history and all that, just as I do." And said, "Yeah, sure, by all means, you know." And yeah, I wouldn't have met all these authors and people without Curious Corvid. I wouldn't have access to even talk to them directly. Now, if I want something, I can, and I need someone's help with reading my work, I can say, "Hey, Sunshine, how are you doing? You mind reading this?" And we'll sort of catch up on how we're doing, and how everything else is doing and going, and then we'll exchange our works and read it again and all that. And you know, that to me, that to me has made probably the most impact and difference in being in this community. The closeness we have with others, the capability of learning and having friends in this industry, because having friends as an author and artist, I'll be frank with you, it's not an easy thing. We're not
No.
easy people. We are very
Mm-mm.
extremely difficult people. I know that myself, having been through countless things in my life. We are extremely difficult to deal with. And we say we are not problematic. We are. As people,
Yes.
artists are problematic. We are not easy to handle.
Yes.
Having friends as an artist, just a bare bones idea of having a friend as one makes all the difference in every manner of speaking. I would not have had other friends being an artist were it not for these communities and these publishers and editors and more actually willing to let you in and say, "Here's you. Now here's the gang. Welcome on in." And I think that yeah, that has made all the difference really. It's it's home. It to
Hmm.
me that's home. To me that is a sense of belonging. I think that is, yeah, that's probably the most important thing of all is there's the feeling of home. Had it not been for that, I don't know.
Very true. Very, very true, Hector. And now we arrive at the final question of this amazing author interview. Now, we have talked about a lot of great things, and you provide some of the best answers I have had on the show to date with everything that we've talked about and more. At the end of the day, when someone picks up your works, either your collection of poems or story you have written, what do you want people to take away from your work? And what piece of advice do you want to instill upon them?
And you're not alone. That beyond all and anythings, you're not alone. It is there's some people out there who, and I say this sparingly because it is not an easy topic to talk about, but there are people out there who are always, every single day and night, contemplating whether to end their lives. And to me, I've been there. Many people have been there. And I think that writing and giving them the answer of saying, "You're not alone. You're not the only one feeling pain. You're not the only feeling suffering, loneliness, hurt, and tragedy." And people who have endured deaths, many deaths I have, and many others have.
Mm.
when you encounter these type of things, it is hard to live with them. And to me, when I write, I want to make feel like I feel this, but I want you to know that what I feel, it's not out of the world. It is here. It exists here. I am with it. You are with it. We as a people are with this feeling, and you are not alone. I think that is probably the most important part for me is let people live another day. If even if it means you wake up tomorrow, even if it means you don't have any goals, nothing, you don't even want to continue tomorrow, the fact that just reading something you woke up the next day is already enough. That to me makes all the difference. If anything else,
Beautifully
let
said. Beautifully said, Hector. Absolutely beautifully said. Honestly, I think that's probably been one of my favorite answers today here on the channel. And a perfect ending to this amazing and very thought provoking and truly reflective author interview. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another amazing episode here on the channel. A huge thank you to my friend Ectorius Angel for coming on the show, making his official debut. Now, Hector, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect? And where can people find your publications?
I think you can find most of my publications through Instagram posts, or if you look, even if you look me up on Google, Ectorius Angel, you'll find more or less some of the published work so far. As for the long-term projects, they will come at a later date when or if they do. That is to be decided from the now. When and if they do, eventually they will, but not right now. As everything else, there's Instagram, there's I mean, there's YouTube, there's Instagram, there's Era magazine, Gipsophyla magazine. There's Curious Corvid, and our Discord
Mhm.
channel as we use that to communicate a lot. Um, yeah, I mean, you look just looking up the name alone, you can easily just find most of the things.
Awesome. I'll provide all those links down below in the description of this video, viewers and listeners. Thank you, everyone, again for joining us for another amazing author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. A huge again thank you to my friend Ectorius Angel for coming on the show, making his official debut into the Wandering Scribe family. Now, if you would like to see Ectorius back again on the show, like this video, comment, and subscribe. And we'll get him in a follow-up interview in the new year and possibly a special in the Wandering Scribe Writers Hub series. And finally, as many of you know, Decimus the Wolf of Rome, my fourth novel, will be coming out on Christmas. So you still have enough time to pre-order a copy. And if you want to be prepared for the series, I highly recommend checking out the two books in the series, or I should say the universe, The Gathering and Son of Persia, which are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and you can find them through Goodreads. I'll link all those down below in the description of this video once more. And as always, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Happy Thursday, everybody, and we'll see you all in the next video. Take care.